July 3rd, 1944. Normandy, France. 500 yards from German lines. James Sullivan lay motionless in a drainage ditch. Through the scope of his Springfield rifle, he could see a ruined farmhouse. Stone walls blackened by fire. Windows empty except for one on the second floor. And in that window movement, a rifle barrel. The distinctive shape of a telescopic sight catching the morning light. A German sniper was establishing his position. Jim's heartbeat slowed to 60 beats per minute. His breathing became automatic. In, out, in, out. Between heartbeats, the world went silent. Between breaths, time itself seemed to pause. 2 years ago, the steadiest thing about Jim Sullivan's hands had been the straight razor he used for hot shaves at his Brooklyn barbershop. His biggest worry was whether old Mr. Kowalski would complain about his sideburns again. The most dangerous thing he did was use scissors near a customer's ear. Now he was tracking one of Germany's most experienced marksmen, Sergeant Karl Richter, Eastern Front veteran. 40 confirmed kills of Soviet soldiers. The Ghost of Normandy, they called him. 3 weeks ago, Richter had shot Jim's commanding officer through the chest at 400 yards. No one had seen him. No one knew where he hid. No one had survived close enough to identify him. Until now. Through the 8-power magnification of his unearthed scope, Jim could see the German adjusting his position. Professional, patient, deadly. The man was focused on the American lines 300 yards to his front, looking for officers, for radio operators, for targets worth revealing his position. He had not considered that another hunter might be watching from his flank. Jim's hands did not shake. The same hands that had spent a decade cutting hair within a millimeter of perfection. The same hands his father called gentle. The same hands that had never hurt anyone until 6 weeks ago. His finger rested on the trigger. The rifle was zeroed for 300 yards. At 500 yards, the .30-06 round would drop approximately 24 inches. He had made this calculation 100 times. In training, in combat, in dreams that wouldn't let him sleep. The German raised his rifle to his eye, preparing to take his own shot. Jim exhaled slowly, squeezed. The Springfield bucked against his shoulder. The sound cracked across the Norman countryside like a whip. Through the scope, he watched Richter's head snap back. The German slumped forward over his weapon, went still. 40, first kill. For Richter, his career was over. 23rd kill. For Jim Sullivan. The ghost was dead, but there was no celebration in the drainage ditch. No sense of victory, just the immediate need to move, to crawl backward through the hedge, to put distance between himself and the firing position before German mortars found him. Because that's what snipers did. They killed from a distance. They disappeared before anyone understood what had happened. They survived by being invisible, by being patient, by being precise. And Jim Sullivan had become very good at all three. The question that haunted him wasn't whether he could kill. He had answered that question 23 times. The question was whether he could ever go back. Whether a barber from Brooklyn, who had learned to kill with surgical precision, could ever be just a barber again. Whether the hands that ended lives could remember how to simply cut hair. To understand how Jim Sullivan became one of America's deadliest snipers, you have to go back 2 years. To March 1942. To a barbershop on Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn. To the day the draft notice arrived. To the moment when war reached into civilian life and pulled out a young man who just wanted to cut hair and marry his girlfriend and live a quiet life. To the day everything changed. March 1942, 3 months after Pearl Harbor. Sullivan's barbershop stood on Flatbush Avenue like it had been there forever. The building was red brick, 3 stories with apartments above and the shop on the ground floor. The barber pole outside spun endlessly. Green, white, red stripes chasing each other in a pattern that hypnotized kids waiting for their turn in the chair. Inside, the shop smelled like bay rum and talcum powder and the particular scent of hair that had just been cut. 2 leather chairs faced 2 large mirrors with ornate frames. The leather was cracked from 20 years of customers settling into it. The mirrors were spotless. Patrick Sullivan insisted on spotless mirrors. The floor was black in white tile in a checkerboard pattern. Hair accumulated in the corners no matter how often you swept. The walls were painted cream. Photographs hung in simple frames. Patrick's father back in Ireland. Patrick in his army uniform from the Great War. Jim's mother, Mary, on their wedding day. Jim's sister, Claire, in her high school graduation picture. A radio sat on the shelf behind the chairs. It played all day. Music, news, advertisements for things nobody could afford. The war news got worse every day. The Philippines were falling. Singapore had fallen. The Japanese were winning everywhere. Americans were dying in places most people had never heard of. Jim Sullivan was 22 years old. He had been cutting hair since he was 14. 8 years of standing behind those chairs. 8 years of learning to read faces in mirrors. 8 years of keeping his hands steady even when customers flinched. 8 years of noticing the tiny details that separated a good haircut from a perfect one. He had steady hands. Everyone said so. Could shave a man's neck without leaving a single nick. Could fade a hairline so gradually you couldn't see where one length became another. His eyes caught details others missed. An uneven part. A stray hair. A customer's mood shifting before they spoke a word. The work was repetitive but satisfying. The same cuts week after week. The same conversations. How about those Dodgers? Can you believe this weather? Did you hear about the Kowalski boy who enlisted? Every 2 weeks like clockwork, the same customers returned. Factory workers from the Navy Yard. Shopkeepers from the neighborhood. Old men who wanted their hair cut exactly the way it had always been cut. Jim's favorite customer was Mr. Kowalski. 70 years old. Came in every Saturday at 10 in the morning. Wanted a trim and a shave. Always complained the sideburns were uneven even when they weren't. Always tipped a quarter even though the cut only cost 35 cents. His least favorite was young Tommy Chen from 3 blocks over. 8 years old, never sat still. Mother had to bribe him with candy just to get him in the chair. But Jim was patient with kids. Remembered being 8, remembered hating haircuts. Remembered his own father's gentle hands making it bearable. Jim had a girlfriend, Sarah Morrison, 20 years old, worked at Morrison's Diner 3 blocks down Flatbush. Dark hair, green eyes, smile that made the whole neighborhood brighter. They had been dating for 2 years. Everyone assumed they would get married. Jim assumed it too. Was saving money. Planning to ask her father's permission. Planning a future that looked exactly like his present, only with Sarah in it. He planned to take over the shop when his father retired. Planned to raise kids in Brooklyn. Planned to cut their hair for free and teach them the trade. Planned to spend 40 years behind those same chairs in front of those same mirrors sweeping the same floor. Plans meant nothing after December 7th, 1941. The world changed that Sunday. Jim had been at Sarah's house for dinner. They were listening to the radio, music program. Then the announcement. The Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor. Thousands dead. Battleships sinking. America at war. Jim's father didn't say much when Jim got home. Patrick Sullivan had fought in the Great War. Had seen the trenches in France. Had seen what war did to young men. Had come home with scars on his body and worse scars in his mind that he never talked about. He just looked at his son and said, "It's starting again." 3 months later, the letter arrived. March 15, 1942. The envelope was thin, official. The return address said Selective Service System. Jim's mother brought it up from the mailbox. Her hands shook as she handed it to him. Patrick Sullivan was reading the newspaper at the kitchen table. He looked up when he saw the envelope, folded his paper, waited. Jim opened it. The words were formal, cold, impersonal. Greetings. You are hereby notified that you have been selected for training and service in the armed forces. Report for induction March 30th, 1942 at Brooklyn Navy Yard Processing Center. Failure to report is a federal crime. The paper felt heavy in Jim's hands, heavier than it should, like it weighed more than the future it was erasing. His mother started crying. Quiet tears, the kind that hurt worse than loud sobbing. His father read the notice without expression, handed it back. His voice was steady, but his eyes were not. You'll do fine, boy. Sullivans always do what's needed. Jim's sister Claire tried to be brave. She was 19, worked at the Navy Yard as a secretary, saw the young men coming and going, saw the gold star flags appearing in windows all over Brooklyn. Each star meant a son who wasn't coming home. Sarah held his hand that night. They sat on her front steps. March air was cold. She wore his jacket around her shoulders. You'll come back, she said. I'll come back. Promise me. I promise. He meant it when he said it. Hoped God wasn't keeping score of promises that couldn't be kept. March 30th arrived faster than time should allow. Jim woke at 5 in the morning. Couldn't sleep anyway. Put on his best clothes. Blue suit his father had given him for his 21st birthday. White shirt, tie. His mother made breakfast, eggs, bacon, toast. Jim couldn't eat, pushed food around his plate, drank coffee that tasted like metal. His father walked him to the Navy Yard. 2 miles. They didn't talk much. What was there to say? Patrick had made this walk 25 years earlier, had reported for the same war they said would end all wars. Now his son was walking the same path. History repeating because men never learn. The processing center was chaos. 200 young men from Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, standing in lines, filling out forms, stripping to underwear for medical exams, raising right hands and swearing oaths to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. A doctor listened to Jim's heart, looked in his eyes, made him read letters on a chart, asked if he had any chronic conditions, any reason he couldn't serve. Jim said no. He was healthy, strong, had good eyes and steady hands, and nothing wrong with him except he wanted to go home. The doctor stamped his file. Next, by noon, Jim Sullivan was no longer a civilian. He was Private James Sullivan, United States Marine Corps. Service number 459832. He had never fired a gun, never camped outdoors, never done anything more physical than sweeping hair off barbershop floors. But the Marines took him because they needed bodies. America was losing men faster than it could train replacements. Pearl Harbor had killed thousands. The Pacific War was consuming soldiers at a terrifying rate. Every young man with 2 working legs and decent eyesight was needed. Jim expected to become just another rifleman, one of thousands learning to march in formation and fire on command. Expected to carry a rifle and dig foxholes and maybe die in some jungle whose name he couldn't pronounce. Then something strange happened. Parris Island, South Carolina, April 1942. Boot camp was 8 weeks of controlled suffering. Running in sand that made every step feel like 10. Marching in heat that made men pass out. Obstacle courses that left bruises and broken bones. Rifle qualification where you either hit the target or did push-ups until your arms gave out. Drill instructors screamed until veins bulged in their necks. Called them ladies. Called them worse. Told them they were the sorriest collection of failures ever assembled. Told them the Japanese would eat them alive. Told them to quit if they couldn't handle it because the Marines didn't want weaklings. Nobody quit. Quitting meant going home in disgrace. Meant disappointing your family. Meant admitting you weren't man enough. So they ran and marched and climbed and suffered and slowly became something other than the boys who had stepped off the bus 8 weeks earlier. Jim discovered he was good at some things. Rifle qualification, for instance. The M1 Garand felt natural in his hands. The weight, the balance, the smooth action of loading and firing. He qualified expert, top score in his platoon. The drill instructor noticed. Sullivan, you a hunter? No, sir. Barber, sir. Barber. Yes, sir. The drill instructor looked at him like he was speaking another language. Marines don't need barbers, Sullivan. Marines need killers. You think you can kill? Jim didn't know, had never thought about it. I'll do what the Marines need, sir. You better, because the Japs sure as hell aren't going to ask polite before they gut you. Week 6 of boot camp. Jim was called to the administration building. A company clerk sat behind a desk stacked with files. Sullivan James, service number 459832, sir. Pre-service occupation. Barber, sir. The clerk made a note, picked up a phone, spoke quietly to someone Jim couldn't see, hung up. Report to the quartermaster. You're being assigned specialist equipment. Jim had no idea what that meant. Followed orders. The quartermaster building was concrete block. Hot. Smelled like gun oil and canvas. The supply sergeant was 40 years old. Too old for combat. Missing 2 fingers on his left hand from some accident nobody talked about. He handed Jim a wooden crate. Sign here. Jim signed. The supply sergeant pushed the crate across the counter. Someone upstairs thinks barbers make good snipers. Don't ask me, I just hand out the gear. Jim opened the crate Inside was a Springfield 1903 A4 sniper rifle, bolt action, woodstock polished to a shine, a unertl 8-power telescopic sight in its own padded case, leather carrying case, cleaning kit that smelled like hops number 9, a logbook with blank pages for recording every shot, date, location, distance, result. Jim stared at the rifle. The scope, the logbook waiting to be filled with kills, 22 years old. Had never imagined killing anyone. Now the Marines were training him to do exactly that, with precision, from a distance where the enemy couldn't fight back. One shot, one kill. That was the sniper's job. The supply sergeant was watching him. "You okay, kid?" "I'm a barber." "Not anymore. Now you're a sniper. Or you will be if you don't wash out. Most do. Training's hard, combat's harder. But if you make it through, you'll be one of the deadliest men in the Corps. That rifle puts you in a very small club." Jim picked up the Springfield. The weight felt right. The balance was good. His hands fit the stock like it had been made for him, and steady hands, Barber's hands, hands that had never hurt anyone. Could these hands kill? The Marines were about to find out. May 1942, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. The Scout Sniper School separated the men who could shoot from the men who could hunt. 30 students started the course: infantrymen, hunters, competition shooters, men who had been shooting since childhood. And Jim Sullivan, Brooklyn barber who had never hunted anything, never owned a gun before the Marines issued him one, never killed anything larger than the rats that sometimes got into the barbershop's back room. The instructors didn't care about backgrounds. They cared about results. Week 1 was fundamentals, marksmanship basics that Jim already knew from boot camp: breath control, trigger squeeze, sight picture. But now the details mattered more. The difference between good shot and perfect shot. The difference between hitting center mass and hitting exactly where you aimed. Ballistics, how bullets drop over distance, how wind pushes them left or right, how temperature affects powder burn and velocity, how humidity changes air density and trajectory. Math, physics, calculations that turn killing into science. Optics, using telescopic sights. Parallax, eye relief. Field of view, focus, learning to see through glass and steel what the naked eye couldn't see at all. Learning to trust the scope more than instinct. Jim discovered something that surprised everyone, including himself. The skills that made him a good barber translated directly to sniping. Steady hands, essential for holding crosshairs on target, holding aim while breathing, while waiting, while the world moved around you but you remained perfectly still. Patience years behind a barber's chair making small talk while his hands worked automatically had taught him to be still for hours, to endure boredom without fidgeting, to wait without complaining. Snipers spent 90% of their time waiting, only 10% shooting. Jim was better at waiting than men who had hunted their whole lives. Attention to detail, eyes trained to spot an uneven hairline from across a room, could detect movement at 600 yards, could see things others missed. A flash of metal, a shadow that wasn't quite right, a shape that didn't belong. The instructors noticed. By week 2, Jim was consistently in the top 3 of the class. Week 3 and 4 were fieldcraft, camouflage and concealment, learning to become invisible. They smeared mud on their faces, draped camouflage nets over their heads and shoulders, wore vegetation like clothing, crawled through fields and forests trying to get close to instructors who were looking for them. Jim learned that stillness was better than camouflage, that patience beat speed, that the human eye was drawn to movement but missed things that didn't move. He learned to control his breathing until it was barely perceptible, to slow his heartbeat through sheer willpower, to become part of the landscape, stalking, moving toward a target without being seen, inches per minute, hours to cover 100 yards. Every movement calculated, every pause deliberate. The instructors were watching. If they saw you, you failed. If you moved too fast, you failed. If you made noise, you failed. Most men failed. 20 of the 30 washouts came during stalking exercises. They couldn't handle the tedium, couldn't stay still long enough, couldn't accept that warfare could be this slow, this boring. this patient. Jim passed. The barber who had spent 8 years standing in one place talking to customers while his hands worked on autopilot found that he could lie in one place for 6 hours without moving anything but his eyes. Hide construction. Building a concealed position from which to observe and shoot, using natural materials. Making it look like part of the environment. Learning to see good positions. High ground with clear fields of fire. Multiple escape routes. Backgrounds that broke up your silhouette. Week 5 and 6 were precision shooting at distance. 100 yards, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600. Learning how different the rifle behaved at each range. How much the bullet dropped. How much the wind mattered. How temperature and humidity and even the rotation of the earth affected the shot at extreme distance. Unknown distance targets. Estimating range by eye alone. Using landmarks. Using bracketing techniques with the scope reticle. Getting close enough that the bullet would hit even if your estimate was off by 50 yards. Moving targets, leading them. Calculating speed and distance, and where they would be when the bullet arrived, not where they were when you pulled the trigger. Most men struggled with this. Jim found it similar to cutting hair on a fidgety child. Predicting movement, adjusting in real time, staying ahead of the motion, stress shooting, after running, after push-ups, after carrying heavy loads, when your heart was pounding and your hands wanted to shake and your breath came in gasps. Learning to control the body's response to exertion. Learning to find that calm place even when everything said you should be panicking. Night shooting, shooting by moonlight, by starlight, by memory when you couldn't see anything at all. Trusting the rifle, trusting the scope, trusting yourself. By week 8, only 16 men remained. Jim Sullivan was third in the class, not because he was naturally gifted shooter, not because he had grown up hunting, but because he understood that precision required calm, that rushing led to mistakes, that good work required taking the time to do it right. Barbering had taught him that, one careful cut at a time, one patient stroke of the razor, one deliberate movement, never rushing, never forcing, letting the tools do the work while your hands guided them with gentle precision. Sniping was the same, one careful breath, one patient wait for the shot, one deliberate squeeze of the trigger. Never rushing, never forcing, letting the rifle do the work while your hands held it steady. The final exam was everything combined. Stalk to within 200 yards of an instructor position. Take the shot. Escape without being spotted. 12 hours to complete. Most men were found before they got close. Some got close but missed the shot. Some hit the target but were caught during escape. Jim passed, stalked through a pine forest for 8 hours, found his position, waited another 2 hours for the perfect moment, took the shot, disappeared into the woods before anyone knew where he'd been. Scout sniper qualified, trained to kill at distance. Ready for war, except he wasn't ready. Not really, because shooting paper targets in North Carolina was nothing like shooting men who had families and lives and dreams. That lesson would come later, on a beach in France, where the real war waited. But first came more training, because snipers needed more than marksmanship. They needed to survive, and survival required skills that went far beyond shooting. June through November 1942, Camp Pendleton, California. Jim was assigned to 2nd Marine Raider Battalion, forming at Camp Pendleton. Raiders were elite, specially trained for operations behind enemy lines, expected to operate independently with minimal support. Every Raider learned advanced skills beyond basic infantry. For Jim, this meant months of additional training. Amphibious operations, how to get off a landing craft without drowning under the weight of equipment, how to move across open beach under fire, how to assault fortified positions. They practiced landings until Jim could do it blind, until his body knew the motions without thinking. Close quarters, combat, hand-to-hand fighting, knife work, silent killing. Skills Jim hoped he would never need but learned anyway. The instructors were veterans of Central America, of China, of places where Marines had fought in small wars nobody remembered. They taught brutal efficiency, no honor, no fair play, just survival. Demolitions, basic explosives, how to destroy bunkers, bridges, equipment. Raiders were expected to wreak havoc behind enemy lines. Jim learned to set charges, to calculate blast radius, to rig booby traps. None of it felt right, none of it fit with being a barber from Brooklyn. But he learned it anyway because Marines didn't ask if you wanted to learn. They told you to learn, and you learned. Land navigation, reading maps, using a compass, navigating without landmarks. Getting lost behind enemy lines meant death. Jim studied maps until he could see terrain in his mind, until he could navigate by stars and sun and the shape of hills on the horizon. Through it all, he maintained his sniper skills. Daily dry fire practice, weekly live fire sessions, range cards for every position they occupied, study of Japanese and German sniper tactics. The instructors brought in after-action reports from the Pacific, from North Africa, from anywhere Americans had fought so far. Read them. Learn them. Don't make the same mistakes other men made. In November, Jim was paired with his spotter, Corporal Tommy Brennan, 26 years old, from Philadelphia, dock worker before the war, 3 years in the Marines, veteran of Caribbean exercises and training operations, married. Wife Margaret was pregnant, baby due in September 1943. Brennan was everything Jim wasn't. Experienced, confident, loud. He joked constantly, told stories that were probably half lies, made friends with everyone, seemed to have no fear at all, or hid it so well nobody could tell. Their first meeting was in the battalion area. Brennan looked Jim up and down, took in the rifle case, the youth, the quiet demeanor. "So you're my sniper?" "Yes, Corporal." "They tell me you're a barber." "Was a barber." "Jesus Christ, they're scraping the bottom of the barrel. Can you even shoot Brooklyn?" Jim showed him his qualification scores. Expert rifle, distinguished graduate scout, sniper school, third in class of 16. Brennan whistled low. "Okay, maybe barbers can shoot, but shooting paper targets and shooting men are different things. You ever kill anyone?" "No." "You will. Question is whether you can do it when the time comes, when you see his face, when you know he's somebody's son, somebody's brother, maybe somebody's father. Can you pull that trigger knowing all that?" Jim didn't know how to answer. "I'll do what the Marines need me to do." Good answer, wrong answer, but good answer. Truth is, nobody knows if they can kill until they do it. Some guys can't, freeze up, start shaking, can't pull the trigger. Then they get everyone killed because the enemy sees them and they're not shooting back. You freeze up on me, Brooklyn, and we're both dead. Understand? I understand. You better. Because I've got a kid coming. I plan to meet him, and that means keeping us both alive. They trained together through the winter, learning each other's rhythms, learning to communicate without words. Brennan would spot, Jim would shoot. They would watch each other's backs in the killing zone where one mistake meant dying. Brennan taught Jim things the sniper school hadn't: how to read terrain from a map and predict where enemy snipers would hide, how to use dead ground to move unseen, how to set up multiple firing positions so you could shift if one got compromised, how to know when to take the shot and when to let the target pass because revealing your position wasn't worth it. Jim taught Brennan patience, how to wait without fidgeting, how to stay still when every instinct said to move, how to trust that stillness and silence were better protection than speed and violence. By March 1943, they were a team, not friends exactly, too different for friendship, but partners, each trusting the other with his life. The battalion trained through spring and summer. Everyone knew invasion was coming, knew that somewhere, someday soon, they would storm a beach and the real war would begin. But nobody knew where or when, just that it was coming. April 1944, England. The 2nd Marine Raiders, now reorganized into specialized scout sniper teams attached to Army divisions, arrived in England in early April. The whole country felt like a staging area. Hundreds of thousands of troops, American, British, Canadian, all gathering in southern England. Ships crowding every harbor. Supplies stacking in every warehouse. Vehicles parked nose to tail on every road. Everyone knew. Invasion was coming, soon. Jim wrote letters home to Brooklyn. Told his father the weather in England was terrible. Rain every day, cold even in April. Told his mother the food was awful. Beans and bread and tea that tasted like dirty water. Told Sarah he missed her. Thought about her every day. couldn't wait to come home. He didn't tell them about the briefings, about maps of French beaches covered with German defenses, about casualty estimates that said 30% of the first wave would die before reaching dry sand, about nightmares where he drowned under the weight of his equipment, about fear that lived in his chest like something with teeth. The training continued. Practice landings where men drowned in full combat gear. Rehearsals where live ammunition was used and accidents killed soldiers before the war even started. Briefings about German defenses, about machine gun positions and artillery pre-registered on every inch of beach, about minefields and wire and obstacles designed to rip landing craft apart. May brought more briefings, more specific. Maps showed exact beaches now. Utah, Omaha. American forces would assault both. British and Canadians would take Gold Juno sword. Biggest invasion in history. 50,000 men hitting 5 beaches simultaneously. Air cover, naval bombardment. Paratroopers dropping behind the beaches to secure key terrain. The briefing officer tried to sound confident. German resistance will be suppressed by the time you land. Naval guns will pound them for hours. Bombers will drop thousands of tons of explosives. They'll be stunned, disorganized, unable to mount effective defense. Nobody believed that. Men who had been in the Pacific knew that the enemy always survived the bombardment somehow, knew that they would be waiting, knew that beaches were killing zones where you either moved forward or died. May 15th, the sniper teams received their specific mission briefing. Colonel Patterson Army Intelligence stood before a map of Normandy. Operation Overlord. You will land with the third wave at Omaha Beach. Your mission is to neutralize German snipers, spotters, and officers. Every German leader you kill saves American lives. Every machine gun nest you suppress allows infantry to advance. You are force multipliers. Act like it. He paused. Let that sink in. Intelligence estimates 30% casualties in the first wave, 50% in the second wave. Third wave, which is you should be lower, but should is not willing. No. Expect German resistance, expect casualties, expect to earn your pay. Brennan leaned over and whispered, "We're getting paid." Jim almost smiled. Almost. May 28th, final equipment inspection. Jim checked his Springfield 1903A4 for the 100th time. Clean, oiled, zeroed for 300 yards. The Unertl 8 power scope was perfect. Lenses clear, mounts tight, backup iron sights functional. Ammunition, 100 rounds of M2 ball cartridge, 30-06, carefully selected for consistency, each round inspected, each brass case perfect. No dents, no corrosion. These were the rounds that would keep him alive, or fail to and get him killed. His logbook was empty, waiting for entries, dates, locations, distances, kills, the record of what he would become. That night, lying in his bunk, Jim couldn't sleep, kept thinking about the logbook, about filling those pages, about reducing human lives to the numbers and distances and check marks confirming death. Kept thinking about his hands, Barber's hands that had spent 8 years giving men better haircuts, making them feel good, making them look sharp, hands that had never hurt anyone. Those same hands would soon be pulling triggers, sending bullets across impossible distances, ending lives with precision that would have made his customers in Brooklyn proud if they only knew. But they would never know. Nobody back home would ever know. Because what he was about to become couldn't be explained to people who hadn't done it, couldn't be understood by people who thought war was heroic, who thought killing was glorious, who didn't know that precision and death made terrible partners. June 5th, 1944. They boarded the landing craft at Southampton. The ships were everywhere, thousands of vessels filling the harbor. The greatest armada ever assembled, heading toward France, toward beaches where Germans waited, toward the beginning of the end, or the end of everything. Jim cleaned his rifle one last time, checked the scope, made sure everything was perfect. Because in 12 hours he would need perfect, would need every skill he'd learned, every hour of training, every ounce of patience, everything that made him a good barber, and everything that made him a deadly sniper. Brennan sat beside him. "You ready, Brooklyn?" "No." "Good. Men who think they're ready are the ones who get killed first. Fear keeps you alive. I'm plenty afraid. Then you'll do fine. Jim hoped he was right. Hoped fear would be enough. Hoped his hands would stay steady when bullets started flying. Hoped he could do what the Marines expected. Hoped he would survive long enough to learn if a barber from Brooklyn could really become a killer. By dawn on June 6th, he would have his answer. June 6, 1944, 05:30 hours, the English Channel. Jim Sullivan stood on the deck of Landing Craft Infantry 243. Around him, 40 Marines checked equipment for the 100th time, tightened straps, tested rifle actions, said prayers that wouldn't be answered for all of them. The darkness was lifting. Gray light spread across the water. In the distance, the coast of France emerged from shadow. Hills, cliffs, beaches that looked peaceful from 5 miles away. They were not peaceful. They were fortified killing zones where thousands of Germans waited with machine guns and mortars and artillery registered on every square yard of sand. The naval bombardment had begun at 05:30. Hundreds of rockets screamed toward shore. Heavy bombers passed overhead in waves, dropping thousands of tons of explosives on coastal defenses. The noise was beyond anything training had prepared them for. A constant thunder that shook the ship and made speech impossible, made thought difficult, made fear feel like the only rational response. Intelligence reports had promised German resistance would be suppressed by the time Marines landed, said the bombardment would stun them, disorient them, make them unable to fight effectively. Intelligence reports were about to be proven catastrophically wrong. Brennan stood beside Jim. His face was pale beneath his helmet. The joking had stopped hours ago. Now there was only silence and the sound of other men vomiting over the side. "You ready for this, Brooklyn?" Jim's hands were steady on his Springfield, but his stomach felt like it was trying to climb out through his throat. "No, you'd say. Hell no, nobody's ready for this." The landing craft dropped its ramp at 09:15 hours, not on the beach, on a sandbar 200 yards from shore. The ramp fell into 4 feet of churning water. Water mixed with blood and oil and the bodies of men from the first 2 waves. Jim went over the side with his rifle held above his head. The weight of his equipment tried to drag him under. 70 pounds of rifle ammunition, grenades, rations, water. The current was stronger than expected. Waves knocked him sideways. Around him, Marines struggled toward the beach through chaos that defied description. German machine guns had survived the bombardment. Concrete bunkers had protected them from rockets and bombs. Now they fired directly into the waves of men wading ashore. Mortar rounds exploded in the shallows. Geysers of water and shrapnel and pieces of Americans who would never see home again. Jim saw a Marine 3 feet to his left take a burst from a machine gun and disappear beneath the surface without a sound. Saw another torn in half by a mortar round. Saw the beach ahead littered with bodies and burning vehicles and men screaming for medics who couldn't reach them through the fire. This was not what training promised. This was slaughter. The water was chest deep for 50 yards, then waist deep, then knee deep. Each step felt like it might be his last. Each breath might be the final one. The noise was insane, continuous, overwhelming. Bullets cracked through the air. Mortars exploded. Men screamed. Officers shouted orders that nobody could hear. He reached the beach exhausted, threw himself behind a destroyed Sherman tank. Bullets sparked off the metal. Mortars walked closer with each salvo. Sand erupted in fountains where rounds struck. The air smelled like cordite and blood and burning fuel. Brennan landed beside him. Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. "Where's the colonel?" "Don't know, can't see anything." They had to move. Staying on the beach meant death. German machine guns had perfect fields of fire. Every inch of sand was pre-registered for artillery. Men were dying because they froze behind cover that wasn't really cover. The only way off this beach was forward, through the wire, through the mines, through the bunkers spitting fire. Marines assembled in small groups behind whatever protection they could find. Sergeants shouted orders. Officers led by example or died trying. Engineers blew gaps in wire obstacles with Bangalore torpedoes. The explosions added to the chaos, added to the noise, added to the fear that made men want to curl up and wait for it to end. Slowly, painfully, the advance began. Jim's job was not to fight on the beach. His job was to survive the beach and get inland where a sniper could actually work. But first he had to not die in the next 60 seconds. A Marine near him stood to run forward. Machine gun fire cut him down before he took 3 steps. Another tried, made it 10 yards. Mortar round landed at his feet. Jim looked away before he saw the result. "We gotta move Brooklyn." Brennan was crawling forward, using bodies for cover, using destroyed equipment, using anything that might stop a bullet. Jim followed. The Springfield was heavy. The scope needed protection. He kept it close to his chest, crawled through sand that was red with blood, past men who were alive but wouldn't be much longer, past men who had been his bunkmates in England and were now just obstacles to crawl around. 50 yards took 20 minutes. Each yard cost lives. But they were moving. The beach was the worst. Once they got off the beach, once they reached the seawall and the bluffs beyond, they could fight, could use their training, could be Marines instead of targets. The seawall was concrete, 4 feet high, dozens of Marines huddled behind it, taking cover, catching breath, preparing for the next push. Lieutenant Colonel James Bradford was there, moving between units, directing fire, inspiring exhausted men to keep pushing. He was 38 years old, West Point graduate, professional soldier. His younger brother had died at Pearl Harbor on the USS Arizona. Bradford had requested combat duty, had refused to command from the rear. His men loved him for it. He stood to wave Marines forward, pointing toward a gap in the wire. "There, move through there, cover each other. Go." The shot came from somewhere inland. Single crack, not the chatter of machine guns, not the boom of artillery, just one rifle shot that stood out because it was alone. Bradford's head snapped back. He dropped without a sound, without time to be surprised, without knowing he was dead. The Marines around him froze. Their commander was down. Shot by an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't fight, couldn't kill. German sniper, maybe 400 yards inland, hidden in the hedgerows that started where the beach ended. Invisible, patient, deadly. Captain Robert Martinez took command immediately. Mexican-American from Texas, combat veteran from North Africa. His voice cut through the shock. "Keep moving. Don't bunch up. Snipers in the hedgerows. Officers lose your rank insignia. Radio operators ditch the antennas. Look like everybody else." 2 Marines dragged Bradford's body behind the seawall. Jim saw him as they passed. The colonel's eyes were open, staring at nothing, a small hole in his forehead. Exit wound had taken the back of his skull. Professional, precise. 1 shot, 1 kill. The work of a master sniper. The kind of sniper Jim would have to become if he wanted to survive. The kind of sniper who had just made this war personal, because Bradford had been a good commander, had treated his men fairly, had led from the front, and some German with a rifle and a scope had ended him from a distance where he couldn't fight back, had killed him the way a hunter kills a deer. Calculated, cold, efficient. Jim looked inland, toward the hedgerows, toward where the shot had come from. Someone was out there, someone very good, someone who would kill more Americans before the day ended unless someone stopped him. Brennan saw Jim's expression. "Not your job today, Brooklyn. Today we survive. Tomorrow we hunt." They moved inland with the rest of the company, off the beach, through the gap in the wire, up the bluff where grass grew and trees provided some concealment from German observers. The fighting continued, close quarters now, Germans in bunkers, Americans with grenades and flamethrowers. Brutal work that snipers couldn't help with. By mid-afternoon, the beach was secured, at terrible cost. Bodies lay in rows near the seawall, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Jim didn't count, couldn't count. Looking at them too long made the fear come back, made him wonder how he was still alive when so many better men were dead. The battalion pushed toward Carentan, toward the hedgerows, toward the maze of small fields and ancient stone walls that made Normandy perfect country for defense, perfect country for snipers on both sides. Night fell, Marines dug foxholes, set up defensive positions, waited for German counterattacks that might come from any direction. Jim cleaned his rifle. The Springfield had gotten wet during the landing. He stripped it completely, dried every part, oiled it, reassembled it, checked the scope for water intrusion. Everything was fine. The rifle worked. The scope was clear. He was ready to do his job. If he could do his job. If Barber's hands that had never hurt anyone until today could pull the trigger when a human face appeared in the scope, that question would be answered soon. June 7th through 9th, the hedgerows. For 2 days, Jim fought as a regular infantryman. The situation was too chaotic for sniper operations. German counterattacks came from multiple directions. Every rifle was needed on the defensive perimeter. The hedgerows were ancient, earthen walls topped with thorny vegetation, 5 feet high, 10 feet thick. Roots grown together over centuries into barriers that stopped bullets and blocked sightlines. Each field was a fortress. Each hedgerow concealed Germans with machine guns and Panzerfausts. Progress measured in yards. Each yard cost blood. Men Jim had trained with died in ambushes, stepped on mines, got cut down by machine guns hidden in hedges they couldn't see through. The Germans knew this ground, had prepared it, had turned every field into a kill zone. June 8th, a German machine gun nest killed 5 Marines in 30 seconds, caught them crossing an open field, cut them down before they could reach cover. The machine gun kept firing, kept anyone from reaching the wounded. One Marine lay in the grass crying for his mother. For 20 minutes he cried, then he stopped. Jim wanted to shoot the machine gunner, wanted to use his scope, his training, his precision, but the nest was positioned perfectly. Couldn't see it from any angle they could reach. Finally, a tank came up, fired 1 round, silenced the gun. But 5 Marines were dead and 3 wounded, and one had cried for his mother until he bled out in French grass. June 9th, the line stabilized. Germans stopped counterattacking. Americans stopped pushing. Both sides dug in. The breakthrough hadn't happened. The rapid advance inland hadn't materialized. Now it would be a slow grinding fight. Hedgerow by hedgerow, field by field, mile by bloody mile. Captain Martinez assembled the scout sniper teams that afternoon. 8 snipers had landed on D-Day. 3 were dead. 1 was wounded. 4 remained, including Jim. Not good odds for specialized troops, but better than the infantry who had lost 40% of their strength in 2 days. Martinez looked tired, older than he is 34 years. We need intelligence on German positions. We need their officers eliminated. We need their snipers dead before they kill more of ours. You're cleared for independent operations forward of the lines. Find them. Kill them. Don't get caught. He looked at Jim specifically. Sullivan, you and Brennan. First mission tomorrow morning. Move 200 yards forward of our lines. Establish observation post overlooking Montmartin. Report German movements. Engage targets of opportunity. Targets of opportunity. Military euphemism for killing human beings. Understood, sir. That night, Jim couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about tomorrow. About the first time. About whether he could actually do it. Training was one thing. Shooting paper targets. Shooting at shapes on a range. But shooting a man. Seeing his face through the scope. Knowing he had a name, a family, a life, and ending it with one squeeze of the trigger. Could a Barber do that? By dawn on June 10th, he would know. June 10th, 1944. Just 600 hours. Jim and Brennan moved out before first light, crawling through hedgerows still wet with dew. The Norman countryside was beautiful in early summer. Green fields, stone farmhouses, apple orchards heavy with fruit. It looked peaceful, like war was something happening somewhere else. It wasn't peaceful. It was a killing ground where death hid behind every hedge and tree. They moved slowly, checking every shadow, every opening, every field before crossing. German patrols were everywhere. German snipers owned these hedgerows at night. Moving carelessly meant dying stupidly. It took 3 hours to cover 800 yards. By 0900, they had established their hide. Thick hedgerow with good sightlines. Multiple escape routes. Background vegetation that broke up their silhouettes. They arranged camouflage netting. Settled in to wait. Scout sniper training had taught them patience was everything. Moving too soon meant death. Firing at wrong targets gave away position and invited artillery. Good snipers waited, watched, chose their moments. For 3 hours, nothing happened. German trucks moved on distant roads. Soldiers walked between buildings in Montmartin, but none came within effective range. None presented targets worth revealing their position. Jim watched through his scope. The 8-power magnification brought the village close. He could see individual soldiers, young men, old men, men who looked tired, men who looked scared, men who looked like they wanted to be anywhere but here, men who looked human. At 0930, a German officer emerged from behind a stone wall, binoculars raised to his face, scanning the American lines, conducting reconnaissance, probably preparing for an attack, or calling in artillery, or doing the same job Jim was doing, observing, gathering intelligence, trying to keep his men alive. Jim's heart rate increased. This was it. The moment. The test. He adjusted his scope. Springfield, 1903A4, was zeroed for 300 yards. The German was at 400 yards. At that distance, the 30-06 round would drop approximately 18 inches. He dialed in the correction. Steadied his breathing. In, out, in, out. Between heartbeats, the world went quiet. Placed the crosshair's center mass on the officer's chest. For a moment, he saw the man clearly, not as a target, as human, someone's son, maybe someone's father, a person who had eaten breakfast this morning, who had dreams and fears, and people waiting for him to come home, who spoke German instead of English, but was otherwise just another man caught in a war he probably didn't want. Brennan whispered, "Brooklyn, take the shot." Jim's hands held steady, the hands that had cut hair for 8 years, that had never hurt anyone, that his father called gentle. They did not shake. The scope's crosshairs rested on the German's chest, on the spot where heart and lungs lived, on the place where a bullet would end everything that made this man human. Jim thought about Colonel Bradford, about the 5 Marines killed by the machine gun, about the boy who had cried for his mother, about all the Americans who would die if German officers kept directing attacks, keep calling artillery, kept fighting. He squeezed the trigger. The Springfield bucketed. The sound was sharp, loud, would carry for half a mile. Through the scope, he watched the officer drop. No dramatic collapse, no movie death, just stopped being upright, stopped moving, stopped being alive. At 400 yards, sound of the shot reached the target almost a full second after the bullet. The German soldiers around their fallen officer looked confused at first, looked around trying to understand what happened. Some ran, some dove for cover, some stood frozen. Jim was already moving, crawling backward through the hedge, putting distance between himself and the firing position. German response would come fast. Mortars first, then maybe artillery. Anyone still in that hide when the shells arrived would die. He reached Brennan's position 60 yards back. Signaled with his hand, 1 kill confirmed. Brennan nodded. "Good shot, Brooklyn. Clean. Now we move before they drop mortars on us." They withdrew another 200 yards, found a secondary hide, waited to see if Germans would pursue. After 30 minutes with no response, Brennan spoke quietly. "How are you feeling?" Jim's hands were shaking now. Not from fear, from adrenaline dump, from realization of what he'd just done, from understanding that he'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "I killed him." "Yes, you did." He was just standing there, looking through binoculars. "And I killed him." He was directing German operations, probably calling in artillery on our guys. "You saved American lives." He had a face, I saw his face. Brennan was quiet for a moment. "They all have faces. Every one of them is somebody's son. Doesn't change what we have to do, doesn't make it easier. But it's the job. You did the job, you'll do it again, and each time it'll hurt a little less, until one day it doesn't hurt at all, and that's when you need to worry." Jim looked at his hands. Barber's hands, killer's hands, same hands, different purpose. "1st of June 10th, 1904, Brennan said. "The tally has begun." They returned to American lines at dusk, reported to Captain Martinez, 1 German officer killed, multiple troop movements observed, intelligence passed to battalion headquarters. Martinez nodded. "Good work, Sullivan. Get some rest. You're going out again tomorrow." That night, Jim wrote a letter home to Brooklyn. Told his father the weather in France was nice. Told his mother the food was still terrible. Told Sarah he missed her. thought about her every day. He didn't tell them about the German officer, about seeing his face through the scope, about the moment of decision, about squeezing the trigger with the same precision he'd used to cut hair, about learning that Barber's hands could kill. He didn't tell them because they could never understand, because some things couldn't be explained to people who hadn't done them, because the distance between cutting hair and taking lives was infinite and also non-existent, because he was different now, had crossed into territory he couldn't return from, had become something other than the boy who'd left Brooklyn 2 years ago, had become a killer, professional, precise, deadly, just like the Marines trained him to be. June 11th through 15th, the routine established. The pattern formed within days. Before dawn, Jim and Brennan would pass through forward lines and disappear into the hedgerows. They carried minimal equipment: rifle, ammunition, water, one day's rations. Anything more would slow them when speed meant survival. They operated for 6 to 8 hours, observing German positions, noting troop movements, waiting for opportunities. When dusk approached, they withdrew before Germans sent their own patrols into darkness. The enemy owned the night in these first weeks. Moving after sunset was invitation to die. Jim learned the ground intimately. Every ditch, every ruined barn, every gap in hedgerows where a man could observe without being observed. He learned which farmhouses Germans used as command posts, which roads they traveled during resupply, which fields they crossed moving between positions. He also learned where German snipers operated. They were good. Many had fought on the Eastern Front, had survived the sniper war between German and Soviet marksmen. That war had produced some of the deadliest shooters in military history. They used the same tactics Jim employed: camouflage, patience, single-aim shots followed by immediate relocation. The difference was experience. Some of these men had been killing since 1941. 3 years of war, hundreds of shots, dozens of kills. They knew things Jim was just learning. New tricks that only came from surviving long enough to learn them. June 11th, second kill, German machine gunner at 300 yards, adjusting his weapon, standing too long in the open. One shot, down. June 12th, third kill, mortar crew member, 500 yards, difficult shot and win. Took 3 minutes to calculate. One shot, down. June 13th, no shots. German activity minimal, just observation. June 14th, fourth and fifth kills. 2 German soldiers crossing a field. Officers by their uniforms. Consulting a map. Standing in the open like they owned the place. First shot at 400 yards. Second shot 5 seconds later before they could scatter. Both down. By June 15th, Jim had 5 confirmed kills. 5 human beings who stopped existing because he pulled a trigger. 5 faces he saw in dreams when sleep finally came. 5 men whose names he would never know, but whose deaths were documented in his logbook with clinical precision. Date, time, location, range, target type, result. Reducing human lives to data points. Making killing into accounting. Maybe that was the only way to do it. Maybe if you didn't reduce it to numbers and distances and technical problems, you couldn't do it at all. Or maybe you became something that frightened you more than the enemy ever could. June 15th was the day Jim nearly died. He had established position overlooking a road junction near Montmartin. Perfect spot. Clear fields of fire. Thick vegetation for concealment. Multiple escape routes. He'd been there for 2 hours. Watching, waiting, patient. A bullet cracked past his head, missing by inches. So close he felt the air displacement. So close that if he'd moved 1 second earlier, it would have taken his skull apart. He had not seen the muzzle flash, had not heard the shot until after the round passed. The speed of sound meant you heard the shot after the bullet arrived if you were the target. Someone had spotted him first. Someone very good. The German sniper had found him. Jim froze. Moving now would confirm his position. The German would be watching through his scope, finger on trigger, waiting for any sign of life, any movement, any indication that the shot had missed and the target was still alive. For 20 minutes, Jim lay absolutely motionless, barely breathing, heart hammering, sweat soaking through his uniform despite cool morning air. Every instinct screamed to move, to run, to get away from this spot where death had just missed him by inches. But movement meant death. The German was watching, waiting, patient, professional, the kind of sniper who didn't miss twice. Slowly, Jim began crawling backward, inches at a time, using the hedgerow for cover. Moving no more than a few inches per minute. Took him 2 hours to withdraw 300 yards. 2 hours of controlled terror. 2 hours of knowing that one wrong move would be his last. When he reached Brennan's position, his hands were shaking. Not from fear exactly, from adrenaline. From understanding how close he'd come to dying without ever seeing who was shooting at him. Jesus, Brooklyn, you okay? German sniper, nearly got me. Professional, very good. Richter. The name meant something. Intelligence had reported a German sniper operating in this sector. Eastern Front veteran. Responsible for killing several American officers. Called Richter. Sergeant Carl Richter. The ghost of Normandy. Maybe. Probably. Brennan looked toward where Jim had been. We need to tell Martinez. This guy's hunting us. We need to know what we're up against. The near miss changed everything. Jim became more careful selecting positions, more attentive to angles from which he could be observed, started using multiple hides during single missions, shifting every hour to prevent the enemy from fixing his location. The German who nearly killed him had taught a lesson no training course could provide. In this war, you were either hunter or hunted, sometimes both simultaneously, and the moment you forgot that was the moment you died. June 16th through 19th, the tally rises. By mid-June, Jim's confirmed kills reached double digits. The kills came in ones and twos, never dramatic clusters, never what civilians imagined war looked like, just patient work, observation, calculation, single shots followed by immediate withdrawal, machine gunner, mortar crew, officers, NCOs, radio operators, anyone whose death would disrupt German operations, anyone whose absence would save American lives. Each kill was documented, each face remembered, whether Jim wanted to remember or not. At night, when sleep wouldn't come, he saw them all, saw the moment before trigger squeeze, saw them drop, saw them stop being alive. He tried not to think about them as human, tried to reduce them to technical problems, range estimation, wind reading, bullet drop calculation. If he thought about families, about mothers waiting for sons who wouldn't return, about wives and children and dreams that would never be fulfilled, he couldn't do the job. But at night, his mind wouldn't let him forget, insisted on remembering, on showing him faces, on making him understand that precision and death made terrible partners. Captain Martinez noticed the effect it was having. Sullivan, you're one of the most effective snipers in this division. You've eliminated more targets in 10 days than some snipers do in entire campaigns. Good work. Good work. Killing men. Like it was craftsmanship. Like it was barbering. Maybe it was. Maybe precision was precision, whether you used it to trim hair or end lives. Maybe the hands didn't care. Maybe only the mind cared. And maybe if the mind cared too much, the hands would stop working. The psychological impact on Germans was noticeable. They couldn't move freely during daylight. Officers avoided open ground. Soldiers traveled between positions at a crouch, always watching the hedgerows, always afraid. Fear was a weapon. Every German who hesitated before crossing an open field represented a small victory. Every officer who refused to expose himself during reconnaissance made German operations less effective. Every soldier who kept his head down instead of returning fire meant fewer Americans died. Jim wasn't just killing men. He was paralyzing an army, making them afraid to move, afraid to fight, afraid to show themselves. The invisible enemy who struck without warning and disappeared without trace. Germans started calling him Der Geist, the ghost. They didn't know his name, didn't know his face, didn't know he was a barber from Brooklyn. But they knew the pattern, single shots from impossible distances. Americans who hunted like predators instead of fighting like soldiers. They doubled guards on command posts, forbade officers from carrying binoculars in the open, increased mortar coverage of suspected sniper positions, assigned dedicated counter-sniper teams to hunt the Americans who were destroying their morale. None of it helped. Jim kept hunting, but the Germans were adapting, and on June 20th, they brought in a specialist specifically to stop him. June 20th, 1944. The ghost arrives. Intelligence reports came through French resistance networks. A new German unit had arrived in the sector. Not infantry, not armor, a specialist. Sergeant Karl Richter, 32 years old, Eastern Front veteran, fought at Stalingrad, Kursk, Leningrad. 40 confirmed kills of Soviet soldiers. Transferred to Normandy in May specifically to hunt Allied snipers who were destroying German officer corps. Captain Martinez briefed the remaining sniper teams. 4 snipers left from the original 8. Half casualties in 2 weeks. The job was dangerous. The life expectancy was short, but the ones who survived were becoming legends. This Richter is the real deal, Martinez said. He killed Colonel Bradford on D-Day. He's the one who nearly got Sullivan on the 15th. Intelligence says he's responsible for at least 6 American KIA in this sector. He's hunting us now. Eyes open. Watch your backs. Don't give him opportunities. Jim felt something cold settle in his chest. The German who nearly killed him had a name now, a face, a history. 40 kills on the Eastern Front. 3 years of war. Professional, patient, deadly. And he was hunting American snipers. Hunting Jim. He's good, Martinez continued. Better than good. He survived the Eastern Front, which means he's the best Germany has. He knows every trick you know, and probably a few you haven't learned yet. Don't underestimate him. Don't take chances. And if you get a shot at him, don't miss. That night, Brennan tried to lighten the mood. So we got the ghost of Normandy hunting the ghost from Brooklyn. Sounds like a bad movie. He's better than me, more experienced. 3 years versus my 3 weeks. You're better than you think. You've survived this long. You've got good instincts. Trust them. My instincts say I should be terrified of him. Good. Fear keeps you alive. Just don't let it paralyze you. When the moment comes when you see him, don't hesitate. Because he won't. The hedgerows of Normandy had become a hunting ground. 2 master snipers stalking each other. American Barber, who had learned to kill. German soldier who had been killing for years. Only one would survive the summer. And Jim Sullivan, lying in his foxhole cleaning his rifle for the 1,000th time, wondered if Barber's hands would be steady enough when that moment came. Wondered if patience learned behind a barber's chair would be enough against a man who had survived 3 years of the deadliest war in history. Wondered if he would see Richter before Richter saw him. Because in the sniper's war, the man who saw first was the man who lived. And the man who died never knew what killed him. June 21st, 1944. Dawn. For 10 days, Jim Sullivan and Karl Richter hunted each other through the hedgerows of Normandy. Neither knew what the other looked like. Neither had seen the other's face. But both knew patterns. Both knew tactics. Both recognized worthy opponent by tradecraft alone. Both understood that this duel would end with one of them dead. The game was chess played with bullets. Each move calculated, each position selected with care. Each shot weighed against risk of revealing location. Patient, professional, deadly. June 21st. Jim established hide overlooking German supply route. Waited 6 hours, took no shots, withdrew at dusk. Next morning he found cigarette butts where someone had been watching his position from 300 yards. The German had been there, watching, waiting to see if Jim would make a mistake, waiting for a shot that never came because Jim had sensed something wrong and stayed still. June 23rd, Brennan spotted muzzle flash from a ruined barn, German sniper taking shot at American patrol. Jim and Brennan maneuvered for 3 hours to get an angle on the barn. By the time they arrived, Richter was gone. Left an empty cartridge case on the windowsill, a calling card, a message. I know you're hunting me, and I'm hunting you. June 25th, Jim took a shot at a German officer, missed. First miss in 17 kills. The officer had moved unexpectedly at the last instant, or someone had warned him. Either way, German response was immediate. Mortars saturated the area within 60 seconds. Jim barely escaped. Someone had been watching. Someone had seen his muzzle flash. Someone had called in fire faster than should have been possible. Richter knew where he was, had seen him, had nearly trapped him. June 27th, Brennan was hit. Not seriously, Bullet grazed his shoulder during withdrawal. They had stayed too long in one position. Richter had triangulated their location from previous shots, had nearly boxed them in. The wound was superficial, but the message was clear. The German was getting closer, learning their patterns, predicting their movements. The mental warfare was exhausting. Every day was a chess match where losing meant dying. Every position and selection meant life or death. Every shot risked revealing location. Every movement might be into an ambush. Jim stopped sleeping well. When he did sleep, he dreamed of crosshairs, of scope views, of faces in the moment before trigger squeeze, of Richter watching him through a German scope finger-tightening bullet coming. Corpsman John Garcia noticed. He was Navy medical attached to Marines, from New Mexico, 29 years old, had seen enough combat to recognize the signs. "Sullivan, you need rest. You're running on fumes." "Can't rest. He's out there, waiting." "Who, Richter?" "The ghost. He's better than me. More experienced. Only reason I'm alive is luck." "Luck and skill. Don't sell yourself short, Brooklyn." But Jim knew the truth. Richter had years of experience. Jim had weeks. The German had killed 40 men on the Eastern Front. Jim had killed 22. By every metric that mattered, Richter should win this duel. Unless Jim could use what Richter didn't expect. Unless Barber's patience could outlast Soldier's aggression. Unless American could think like German and predict his moves. Unless steady hands that had cut hair for 8 years could be steadier than hands that had killed for 3. The answer would come on July 3rd, 1944, 0500 hours. Jim had been watching the ruined farmhouse for 2 days. The stone walls were blackened from fire. Windows were empty except for one on the second floor. That window had a clear view of American lines 300 yards away. Perfect position for a sniper. Richter was using it, Jim was certain. The German had established a pattern, used the same hide multiple times. Confidence from years of success made him slightly predictable. Not much, just enough. Jim had positioned himself on Richter's flank, where the German wouldn't expect an American sniper to penetrate so deep into no man's land, where fields of fire overlapped in a way that created a blind spot Richter couldn't cover alone. He had crawled into position the night before, 12 hours in the dark, moving inches at a time, building his hide in darkness, settling in before dawn, waiting. The wait was everything. Rushing meant dying. Patience meant surviving. 8 years behind a barber's chair had taught him patience that other men didn't have, couldn't develop, couldn't maintain. At 0745, movement in the farmhouse window, a rifle barrel appeared, the distinctive shape of a German scope catching morning light. Someone was setting up, preparing for the day's hunting. Through his 8-power scope, Jim could see more, could see the shape of a man behind the rifle, could see him adjusting position, getting comfortable, preparing to spend hours watching, waiting, patient. The German raised his rifle to his eye, preparing to take his own shot at Americans who didn't know death was watching them. Jim's heartbeat slowed. Breathing became automatic, in, out, in, out. Between heartbeats, the world went silent. Springfield 1903A4, zeroed for 300 yards. Target was at 500 yards. At that distance, the .30-06 round would drop 24 inches. He had practiced this shot 1,000 times, in training, in combat. In dreams where missing meant dying, crosshairs on the German's head, visible through the window. Clear shot, one opportunity. If he missed, Richter would disappear, would hunt more carefully, would kill more Americans. Might kill Jim next time. Don't think about missing. Think about the shot. Think about the wind. Think about the range. Think about the bullet drop. Think about everything except what happens if you miss. Jim thought about Colonel Bradford, about the near miss on June 15th, about Brennan's wound, about all the Americans Richter had killed or would kill if this shot missed, about ending the duel, about surviving, about going home. He squeezed the trigger. The Springfield bucked against his shoulder. The sound cracked across Norman countryside. Through the scope, he watched the German's head snap back, watched him slump forward over his rifle, watched him go still. 24th confirmed kill for Jim Sullivan. The duel was over. 41st kill. For Carl Richter, his war was over. Jim didn't celebrate, didn't feel victorious, just documented in his logbook. July 3rd, 1944, 07:45 hours. Enemy sniper, 500 yards. One shot, confirmed kill. Then he crawled backward out of his hide, put distance between himself and the firing position. German response would come. Mortars, artillery, men searching for the American who had killed their best sniper. He was 300 yards away when the first shells landed, right where he had been, right where he would have died if he had stayed to admire his work. That afternoon, French resistance identified the body. Sergeant Karl Richter, German Army, Eastern Front veteran, 40 confirmed kills. One of Germany's most experienced snipers, dead at age 32, killed by an American who had been cutting hair 2 years earlier, killed by steady hands and patient waiting and a bullet that dropped exactly where mathematics said it would drop. Jim felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just relief, and strange sadness that a skilled soldier was dead. That war turned professionals into corpses. That precision and death made terrible partners. That night he couldn't eat, sat outside his foxhole while other Marines celebrated. The ghost was dead. The German who had killed Colonel Bradford, who had nearly killed Sullivan, who had terrorized the sector for weeks. Dead. One less threat, one less thing to fear. But Jim couldn't celebrate, kept thinking about Richter, about his 40 kills, about the men he'd killed on the Eastern Front, Soviet soldiers who had families, who had died because a German with a rifle was slightly better than they were on one particular day. Now Richter was dead because Jim was slightly better on this particular day, or slightly luckier, or slightly more patient. The margin between life and death was so thin you couldn't see it, couldn't measure it, could only experience it. Corpsman Garcia sat beside him. "You okay, Sullivan?" "I killed a man today. Not just any man, one of their best. He was trying to kill you, kill our guys. I know, but he was professional, like me, just doing his job. And now he's dead because I was slightly better today, or slightly luckier. That's war, Brooklyn. Good men die, bad men die. Most are just men, doing what they're told, trying to survive." Jim thought about Richter's wife. The intelligence report had mentioned her, killed in Hamburg firebombing. July 1943. Richter had lost his wife, had kept fighting, had done his job without hatred. Professional to the end. Garcia, am I a good person who does bad things or a bad person who was good once? Garcia was quiet for a long moment. Neither, you're human. Humans are complicated. You do what's necessary. That doesn't make you bad, makes you brave. Jim wanted to believe that. But 24 confirmed kills made it hard to feel brave. Made him feel like precision had become perversion. Like skills meant for creating had been corrupted into destroying. The barber from Brooklyn had become too good at killing, and he wasn't sure he could ever be just a barber again. July 4th through 19th. The grinding continues. With Richter dead, German sniper activity decreased. But the war continued. The hedgerows remained. The killing continued. The slow advance toward St. Lo, toward Paris, toward Germany itself. Jim's tally climbed. 27, 29, 32, each kill documented, each face remembered, each entry in the logbook marking another human who stopped existing because he squeezed a trigger. The work became routine, not easier, never easier, but routine. Wake before dawn, move forward of lines, establish hide, wait, watch, calculate, shoot, withdraw, sleep, repeat. His hands stayed steady, his eyes stayed sharp, his patience remained infinite. The barber's skills served him well in sniper's work, but the cost accumulated, in dreams, in moments of silence, in the weight that settled on his chest and never quite lifted. July 18th, Operation Cobra began, American breakout from Normandy, armor crashing through German lines. The static war was ending, the front was moving, infantry advancing, Germans retreating, the tide turning. Marines needed intelligence on German positions before the big push. Jim and Brennan moved deep into enemy territory, observing reinforcements, taking shots when opportunities presented. One officer, 2 NCOs. disrupting German command structure the one bullet at a time. July 20th. They were preparing to withdraw when German patrol appeared. 1400 hours. Near St. Lo, 12 German soldiers, moving through hedgerow directly toward their hide. No way to avoid detection. No escape route that didn't cross open ground under German observation. They were trapped. Brennan saw them first. Brooklyn, company, were blown. Options evaporated like morning dew. Fight meant dying, but surrendering meant what Germans didn't treat snipers well. Geneva Convention said prisoners should be protected. Reality said snipers got shot. Brennan made a decision without consulting Jim. I'll draw them off. You run. Get back to lines. Tell Margaret I tried to come home. Tommy, no, we go together. Can't. One of us needs to survive. You're better shot. Marines need you more. I'm already dead, Brooklyn. Just buying you time. Before Jim could argue, Brennan was moving, running across open field, firing his rifle, drawing German attention away from the hide, away from Jim, sacrificing himself so a barber from Brooklyn could keep hunting. Germans took the bait, turned toward the running man instead of the hidden sniper. Bullets cut Brennan down 30 yards into his run. He fell hard, tried to get up, couldn't, lay in the grass bleeding. Jim had a choice: stay hidden and escape, or try to save his partner and probably die. Barber's hands picked up the rifle and started shooting. Germans scattered, surprised by fire from unexpected direction. Jim dropped 3 before they found cover, pinned them down long enough to reach Brennan. His partner had taken a bullet through upper chest. Bad wound, but not immediately fatal if they got help soon. Blood soaking through uniform. Breathing labored. Stupid Brooklyn, told you run. Shut up, Tommy, we're both going home. Jim dragged him 300 yards toward American lines. Took an hour, moving between shell craters, freezing when Germans searched. Brennan trying not to scream from pain, trying not to make noise that would get them both killed. American lines finally appeared. Marines saw them coming, provided covering fire. Corpsman Garcia reached them within seconds. He'll live. Lucky shot missed the heart. I'll get him evacuated. Brennan grabbed Jim's hand. Grip, weak. Margaret, baby, tell them. You'll tell them yourself. You're going home, Tommy. War's over for you. And it was. Brennan was evacuated to England that night. Would eventually return to Philadelphia. Would meet his son James, born September 1944. Named after the barber from Brooklyn who saved his life. But Jim Sullivan's war continued. Without his spotter. Without his partner. Without the man who had kept him alive for 6 weeks of the most intense combat either had experienced. Captain Martinez assigned him a new spotter within 2 days. Private David Chen, 20 years old, Chinese-American from San Francisco, young, eager, wanted to prove himself. Jim taught him everything Brennan had taught him. Patience, observation, when to shoot and when to wait, how to read German patterns, how to survive in a killing ground where death hid behind every hedge. David was a good student, quick learner, careful, professional, but he wasn't Brennan. Nobody could be Brennan. August through December 1944, the long campaign. The Marines pushed through Normandy, past St. Lo, past Paris, across the Seine, into Belgium, into Holland. The Germans fought desperate rearguard actions, died in place, retreated, died again. The war was grinding them down, but they kept fighting. Jim's tally climbed, 35, 37, 40, each number representing a human life ended, each kill necessary, each death weighing on him. August brought urban fighting, cities instead of hedgerows, different terrain, different tactics, shorter ranges, multiple firing positions, faster shots. Jim adapted. The barber who had learned patience applied it to killing in Eindhoven, in Maastricht, in Bastogne during winter, September, October, November, December. The months blurred together, combat, rest, combat, rest. Each day the same, each day different, each day survived was miracle. January through May 1945. Into Germany itself, the final push, crossing the Rhine. Fighting through the Ruhr, pushing toward Berlin, though Marines in the western sector never reached it. German resistance collapsing, but pockets of fanatics fighting to the end. Jim saw the concentration camps, Buchenwald, Dachau, saw what they had been fighting against, what the war was really about, the evil that had to be stopped at any cost. It didn't make killing easier, but it made it more necessary, made him understand that some men needed to be stopped. Not all Germans, but the ones running the camps, the SS, the true believers. They needed to be stopped. And if that meant becoming a killer, then he would be a killer. May 8, 1945. War in Europe ended. Jim Sullivan was somewhere in Bavaria when the ceasefire took effect. He had been in combat intermittently for 11 months. His confirmed kill count stood at 37 Germans, one of the highest tallies recorded by any American sniper in the European campaign. David Chen survived, would go home to San Francisco, would use GI Bill to become an engineer, would never forget the barber who taught him that courage came in quiet forms. There were no medals for what Jim had done. Snipers didn't receive the recognition given to men who charged machine gun nests or led bayonet assaults. Their work was too quiet, too patient, too removed from heroic narratives that military decorations were designed to celebrate. Jim returned to the United States with the same rank he had held on D-Day. Private, nothing more. He went home to Brooklyn, to Sullivan's barbershop on Flatbush Avenue, to the life that had been waiting, to the question whether Barber's hands could cut hair again without remembering what else they had done. June 1945, Brooklyn, New York. Sullivan's barbershop was exactly as Jim remembered. Same leather chairs, same spotless mirrors, same green and white poles spinning endlessly. His father had kept it running through the war, cutting hair, sweeping floors, waiting for his son to come home. Patrick Sullivan didn't ask about the war, didn't need to. He saw it in Jim's eyes, in his hands that shook slightly when idle, in the way he flinched at loud noises, in the nightmares that made him wake up reaching for a rifle that wasn't there. Just said, "You're home now, boy. That's what matters." Jim's old customers returned. Factory workers, shopkeepers, old men, kids. They asked what the war was like. Jim talked about the weather in France, about the food, about mud and rain and cold. Things civilians could understand without having their image of war disturbed. He didn't tell them about the German officer shot at 400 yards, about Karl Richter killed at 500 yards, about 37 human beings who stopped existing because Jim squeezed a trigger with the same precision he had once used to cut hair. But late at night, cleaning his scissors before closing the shop, Jim's hands remembered both. Remembered the weight of the Springfield, remembered the recoil, remembered the faces through the scope in the moment before squeeze, remembered that precision could be used for creation or destruction, that steady hands could give life to haircuts or take life at distance, that skills transferred in ways you never expected. Sarah came back. They married in 1946. Small ceremony, just family, just neighbors, just the people who had waited while Jim was gone. They had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. Jim never told them much about the war. When they asked, he said he was in the Marines, did his job, came home. That was enough. Patrick Sullivan died in 1968. Heart attack, quick, peaceful. Jim took over the shop completely. Cut hair in the same chairs his father had used, same mirrors, same precision, hands steady despite everything they had done. The skills that made Jim Sullivan a deadly sniper were the same skills that made him an excellent barber. Steady hands, patience, attention to detail, ability to remain calm and focused while performing precise work. The Marines had recognized something in his occupation that Jim himself had never considered. That a man who could cut hair to within a millimeter of perfection could also place a bullet exactly where it needed to go. War had proven them right. But peace proved they had never really understood what they had done to a Brooklyn barber who just wanted to cut hair. Because the hands remembered. Always. Even when the mind tried to forget. 1978, 33 years later, a young woman from the Historical Society came to the barbershop. She was doing an oral history project on World War II veterans. Marine Corps records showed Jim Sullivan had been a scout sniper in the European theater. Would he be willing to talk about his service? Jim was 68 years old, still cutting hair, still steady. Sarah was at home. The kids were grown. Life had continued like rivers continue, flowing around obstacles, finding ways forward. He agreed to the interview. Maybe it would help young people understand. Maybe it would give his war some meaning beyond killing. The young woman set up her tape recorder, asked questions. Jim answered, chose his words carefully, told truth without telling everything. What was it like being a sniper? Jim thought about how to answer, about all the things he couldn't say, about faces through scopes, about logbooks with 37 entries, about Richter's head snapping back, about Brennan bleeding in French fields, about coming home and pretending to be normal while hands that killed tried to remember how to be gentle. It was waiting, he said, mostly waiting, watching, looking for opportunities. When opportunity came, you took the shot. Then you moved. That was the job. Were you afraid? Every day, fear kept you alive. Men who weren't afraid made mistakes. Mistakes got you killed. Did you feel bad about the men you killed? Jim was quiet for a long time. I felt responsible. They were human beings. They had families, dreams, futures. I ended those futures. That's not something you feel good about, even when it's necessary. But it was necessary. Yes, we were fighting evil. Real evil. The concentration camps proved that. Someone had to stop it. And if that meant becoming a killer, then that's what I became. Do you think you're a hero, Byrne? Jim almost laughed. Almost. No, heroes charge machine gun nests. Heroes sacrifice themselves for others. I hid in bushes and shot men from distances where they couldn't fight back. That's not heroism. That's assassination with permission. But you saved lives, American lives. Maybe. Probably. I hope so. That's what I tell myself when the faces come back. When I wonder if a barber from Brooklyn should have just cut hair and let better men do the killing. The young woman didn't know what to say to that. Neither did Jim. She thanked him, packed up her recorder, said the interview would be archived at the Historical Society, said young people needed to hear these stories, said he had done something important. Jim went back to cutting hair. Same chairs, same mirrors, same precision. The shop was quieter now, fewer customers. The neighborhood was changing, but the work remained. One careful cut at a time, one patient stroke, one deliberate movement. Just like sniping. Except nobody died when he made a mistake. 94, Jim Sullivan died. He was 84 years old. Died in his sleep. Sarah holding his hand. No pain, no drama, no final words. Just stopped breathing one night and didn't start again. His obituary in the Brooklyn paper mentioned he had served in the Marines during World War II. Said he had run Sullivan's barbershop for 40 years. Said he was a good father, good husband, good man. Said he would be missed. It didn't mention the 37 Germans. Didn't mention Carl Richter. Didn't mention that precision and patience could be used for both creation and destruction. Didn't mention that ordinary people could become extraordinary killers when circumstances demanded. But the truth lived on anyway. In Marine Corps archives, in historical records, in the oral history locked away in the Historical Society basement, in the story of a barber who became a sniper, in proof that skills transfer in unexpected ways, in demonstration that war turns civilians into soldiers and sometimes can't turn them back, in understanding that anyone could become a killer given enough training and motivation and war. Even a barber from Brooklyn who just wanted to cut hair. Jim Sullivan was not special, not a hero, not a legend, just a barber who did what the Marines asked him to do, who killed when told to kill, who came home when allowed to come home, who spent 40 years trying to forget what he had learned about himself in French hedgerows, that he could kill, with precision, without mercy, with the same steady hands he used to cut hair, and that scared him more than any German sniper ever had, because it meant anyone could become a killer. Given the right circumstances, the right training, the right war, the hands didn't care whether they cut hair or took lives. The hands just did what they were trained to do. Steady, patient, precise. It was the mind that cared, the mind that remembered, the mind that carried the weight of 37 lives ended, the mind that saw faces and dreams decades after the war ended, the mind that understood that Jim Sullivan Barber from Brooklyn had discovered something about humanity that most people never learned. That civilization was thin, that normal people could do terrible things, that precision was morally neutral, that skills served whoever wielded them. That war didn't make you different. It revealed what you always were, capable of anything, good or evil, creation or destruction, life or death, all depending on who gave you orders, who pointed you at targets, who told you when to squeeze and when to hold. Jim Sullivan had been a good barber, had been a good sniper, had been a good father and husband, had been good at precision regardless of purpose. And maybe that was the lesson, that skills were just skills, that hands were just hands, that precision was just precision. What mattered was what you chose to do with them, what you chose to create or destroy, what you chose to give life to or take life from. Jim Sullivan had chosen nothing. War had chosen for him, and the Marines had chosen for him, and history had chosen for him, but he had done the work, had pulled the triggers, had ended the lives, had carried the weight. And when he died in 1994, that weight died with him, leaving only the story, the record, the memory of a barber who became a killer and then became a barber again, proving that you could go home, could return to normal life, could cut hair and raise children and live quietly, but proving also that you never really left the war behind, that the faces stayed, that the weight remained, that precision in service of death left marks that time couldn't erase, that a barber's hands, no matter how steady, always remembered what they had done in France, in Normandy, in hedgerows where men hunted men and the patient survived while the careless died. Always remembered that Jim Sullivan had been very good at being very patient, and that patience combined with precision had made him one of America's deadliest snipers, and also one of Brooklyn's best barbers. Because the hands were the same, the skills were the same, the precision was the same, only the purpose changed, and with it everything.